After 5 days and deafening silence, we finally have it. Breaking news. The Toronto Maple Leafs have fired Kyle Dubas. What's up, Leafs fans, and welcome back to Leafs Digest. Yes, that is correct. We are sitting here on Friday, heading into the long weekend here up in Canada. And of course, what better time would there be for the Toronto Maple Leafs to drop this massive news than the Friday going into long weekend for everyone? Kyle Dubas is no longer the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, we're going to get into this a little bit here in terms of what happened. But first and foremost, we'll go through what transpired over the previous week for Kyle Dubas to no longer come back, what might happen with the core four going forward, what this means for the remainder of the team, and some of the things we might see over the next little while, as well as some ideal candidates. So let's start here with what happened. Now, I know I opened with saying Kyle Dubas has been fired, and people are going to look at that and say, well, we heard that he was maybe debating himself, and maybe he walked away, and he decided not to come back. Look, based on what transpired this week and the PR release that came out here today from the Toronto Maple Leafs, all sources indicate to Kyle Dubas being fired by the Toronto Maple Leafs. Looking at this here, Maple Leafs announced Dubas will not return as general manager. Brendan Shanahan, president and alternate governor of the Toronto Maple Leafs, announced today that the club has decided to part ways with general manager Kyle Dubas. Dubas' contract is set to expire on June 30th, and he will not return as Toronto's general manager next season. In quotes here, I would like to thank Kyle for his unwavering dedication over these last 9 seasons with the organization, including his last 5 as general manager. Kyle fostered a great culture within our dressing room and staff and consistently pushed to make our team better season over season. We wish Kyle and his family the best moving forward and thank him for his valuable contributions. That, to me, does not come across as Kyle Dubas having decided to move on from the Toronto Maple Leafs. Given what went on this week, given the news that he broke on Friday himself of him having to go and take time, us hearing about all these insiders reporting that MLSE had a deal on the table for Dubas and he was the one mulling it over, I, at this point in time, believe that MLSE was blindsided by Kyle Dubas' comments on Monday. By all indications, the Toronto Maple Leafs and MLSE had offered Kyle Dubas a contract ahead of locker cleanout day. When he went up on the podium and spoke about how he needed to take time to think about this, he needed to decide if he wanted to come back, and he needed to figure out if he wanted to do this, MLSE had decided at that point in time they were not going to be the ones held hostage here. They were going to be proactive and get out ahead of this. At that point in time, Kyle Dubas basically had turned it around and tried to hold the power against MLSE, and it looks like they had kind of turned around and said, no, this isn't happening to us. We are the ones in control here. At which point in time, they decided to part ways with Kyle Dubas. Having that deal on the table for him, all these insiders reporting that it was out there, it was available to him, and him not accepting it, him saying that kind of stuff, probably put them in an uncomfortable position that felt like maybe he didn't have faith in them. He didn't have faith in MLSE, which obviously is not going to sit well with them, especially when they're going to sit around and say, hey, you've had no success here. You didn't win the Stanley Cup, didn't get to a conference finals, nothing. Why should we be held hostage by you? All in all, I believe that what transpired here is over the course of the week, MLSE decided it was no longer time for them to sit around and wait for Kyle Dubas to be in this position of deciding whether or not he wanted to come back when they had put this offer on the table for him. They elevated him to be a general manager of an NHL team, a position of which he had never been in before. They brought him from junior hockey into the big leagues. They brought him to the pros. They gave him an opportunity. They pushed Lou Lamoriello out the door. And then after he had no success here, after utilizing all of the money and the resources available to him, he told them, it's up to me, not you. And it looks like MLSE decided, no, it's not. It is up to us. And they decided to part ways with Kyle Dubas. So, all in all, that's where I get to in terms of saying MLSE has decided to fire Kyle Dubas here. Now, next thing, Core 4. What happens with them? What is the response? Because I've seen a lot of stuff online recently about fans and how they feel. So let's get to the Core 4 and what's next here. Look, first and foremost, John Tavares, nothing. I don't care if it's Kyle Dubas, Brian Burke, Brendan Shanahan himself. I don't care who it is that's coming in here to be in this position. I genuinely think John Tavares, there's no shot of him going elsewhere. He's a point per game guy. He's the darling Toronto kid who finally decided to come home as a UFA. You may not like his contract, but him as a player, he is still effective. He still puts up points. He's still here. He's not going anywhere. He wears the captaincy. That is the end of the story. Nothing there. In terms of the new guy coming in, they're going to look at the three other guys, 16, 88, and 34. Matthews, Nylander, Marner, how are you guys going to stack up here within this team and the plans that this team has going forward? How do your contracts fit? How do your no-move clauses fit? What are your plans? All that kind of stuff. Starting with William Nylander, he's the one guy to me I would like to come back. I just don't know how it's going to shake out for the new GM. So I can't speak to that at all right now. I don't know what that guy's going to be like, what his plans are, how much money he wants to spend, how much money he doesn't want to spend, how he wants to structure all this. I have no idea. So William Nylander, I can't speak to. The big one to me is Auston Matthews. I strongly believe that Toronto Maple Leafs fans are catastrophizing, if that's even the word to use in this situation, the entire Auston Matthews situation and how close he is to Kyle Dubas. First and foremost, I think that this is just Leafs fans freaking out about the fact that Kyle Dubas is gone and immediately drawing conclusions that Auston Matthews is gone because they were friends, because they were close, whatever. I think that that's a little bit ridiculous to be speculating at this point that that is the case. We don't know one way or another. We don't know how close they truly were, how close they weren't. We don't know if Auston Matthews' decisions are tied to Kyle Dubas. We have no idea. So pump the brakes on that. But I will say this. If Auston Matthews' decision to stay as a Toronto Maple Leaf is tied to the idea of being friends with the general manager, this may be more of a bigger testament to what is wrong with this team than people even realize. If this is about, I need to be friends with Kyle Dubas, I need to be friends with my boss, I need my friend Mitch Marner here, because if he's gone, I can't play here, then I think that that is a bigger statement of what is wrong with this team and what is wrong with this culture than we may even realize before coming into this season. You know the meme out there, tip of the iceberg, sitting above the water, and the true problem underneath? If you are sitting in a position in the National Hockey League, this is professional hockey, the best league in the world. This isn't summer camp where you tell your parents that you want to go to the nice instructor with all of your friends. This is the National Hockey League, where you are expected to perform, you are expected to produce results of which these guys have not. And if you are going to throw a hissy fit and pack up your bags and leave because your friend isn't here anymore and your boss is no longer your friend, then maybe, just maybe, that is what's wrong, and that is what has been wrong with this culture of why they can't succeed. Because they are more interested in being friends and having fun and just being around each other than they are of winning. Because if he's going to pack up and walk away because Kyle Dubas, the guy who has not yet been able to get it done as the general manager here of the Toronto Maple Leafs, is no longer the GM, what are we doing? What are we doing at that point? That is a complete and utter joke, and in my opinion, is a huge statement on what goes on here and the reason why this team can't win. You talk about fostering a winning culture. Yes, there's something to be said about mental health advocacy, 100%, and creating a good, healthy, respectful, welcoming community. Those are all very important things. But other organizations can build that while also having some type of killer mentality of trying to win, because guess what? It's the National Hockey League. This isn't the hold your hand league. It's the National Hockey League. You play to win the Stanley Cup. End of story. End of story. The one goal every single year is to win the Stanley Cup. They have not yet done that. In fact, they haven't come close. So if you're not willing to accept change and accept that you haven't been good enough, and now you're going to be upset that your friends are gone, boo-hoo. You are paid to win. Auston Matthews took every dollar he could get from the Toronto Maple Leafs and took a shorter deal. He was given those things. He was given the keys. Was not able to perform in the playoffs to the standard that we would hope that he could. And now that the GM is gone, the guy that's your friend is gone, you're going to pack up and leave? That says more to me about the culture that's being built here than it does anything else. So instead of panicking that this guy might want to leave because Kyle Dubas is gone, maybe if he wants to leave because Kyle Dubas is gone, it's for the better. Because otherwise, we were just going to continue to build this culture of accepting mediocrity. They got to 1 second round in 7 years. And in that second round, they lost the same way that they had lost every other year. The core four didn't perform. So for me, I'm not worried about it. Because if he wants to leave because Dubas is gone, maybe that's for the better. I would prefer to have him around. I have faith in the new GM to keep him. And I actually have more faith in Auston Matthews than I think the fan base does. Because I don't think that that's the case for him. I have higher hopes. I have higher expectations. And I believe he wants to win. I believe he's going to look at this as an opportunity to get this done. Maybe he holds himself accountable for not having been good enough in the playoffs through 7 years here to be able to help get this team over the hump. Maybe he sits there and says, wake up call. I need to be better. I think he wants to win. I think he still wants to be a Maple Leaf. This is all speculation, obviously, but I think that he will still re-sign here. And I don't think the GM matters. So I actually have a higher belief in Matthews and who he is in terms of his personality of trying to win than I think where we're at for the majority or for a lot of some of the Leafs fans out there. That is where we're at with the core four. In terms of Mitch, Nylander, I think that a new GM coming in here significantly raises the opportunity for one of those four to be traded. I don't know who. I don't know what the deal looks like, but that's kind of where I'm at with that. Now, in terms of what this means for the rest of the team, just a few jot notes of some of the stuff that we're likely to see over the next little while for some of the outside pieces and not like the main guys there. First and foremost, we see now that the Toronto Marlies' entire coaching staff has been canned. Those were all Dubas' guys. Basically, what I'm looking at here is that Sheldon Keefe, he will be next person to be gone. If he's not gone already, as Brendan Shanahan is speaking as I'm recording this right now. Then I look at Kerfoot, Hall. I believe they're gone. I think outside of that, we're going to see a new look approach of this team. I don't think this is going to be some drastic overhaul, but I think there's going to be some tweaks to change the culture, whether that's personnel, whether that is captaincies, the coach, whatever it is, there's going to be a new look and a new feel and culture around this organization going forward. So I'm very interested to see what happens there. And finally, some ideal candidates for moving forward with this Leafs team, some guys who I think may be some good options to come in here and be the GM of this team going forward. First and foremost, the number one guy on my list, Eric Tulsky. He's currently the assistant general manager in Carolina. By all accounts, he is a very, very smart hockey mind. He is next up to be out as a general manager on his own with another team, and I think it would be wise for the Leafs to get ahead of things and get on that. In terms of looking internally, externally, I prefer to go externally because I think that this Leafs team, this organization needs a fresh set of eyes. You went from Lamoriello into Dubas while Dubas was here for a few years before he took over the GM job. It had just built in from what he had already known and already believed and felt about this team ahead of time to build to where he was at now. And it was just the same look for about 10 years here while he was a part of the organization. I think now is the point in time where you get fresh eyes to come in here, look externally. They have no preconceived notions of who these guys are, no emotional attachments, nothing. You take a step back, you look outside, and then you come in and try to find something from there where you can maybe look forward to with this GM, with a new coach, and just have a fresh outlook on things. So that's where I'm going. But my number one guy, Eric Tulsky. Number two, Matthew Darche. Matthew Darche is currently the director of hockey ops and the assistant general manager in the Tampa Bay Lightning organization. I don't care if the GM has been a first-time GM, is being a GM for 35 years. I don't care what the situation is with the new GM. That's not as important to me in terms of rookie, veteran, whatever it is. More whether or not it's an internal or external. I would prefer an external guy to be the new GM here. I think the more important thing is the coach that comes in here. That guy has to be a veteran coach, has to be someone who's been around. I look at some of the coaches that are remaining in the NHL playoffs now, outside of Rod Brind'Amour. All these guys have been around the NHL for a while, have coached numerous different teams, and Rod Brind'Amour to me is a special exception to the rule just based on who he is as his personality, because he much more resembles the old guys who have been around the league for a long time. He's a guy who won a Stanley Cup, and he's a guy that those players on that team would run through a wall for, so I think that's a different situation. But look at Matthew Darche. By all accounts, very smart hockey mind, running as the AGM and has been a part of the Tampa Bay Lightning organization, learning from those guys, learning how they run things, learning about the ins and the outs of the operation. I think he could be a smart guy to come through here. Went to McGill University, educated guy. This could be a good opportunity to look for. The third one, I think people may explode their brains over, Brad Treliving. I know that people look at the Calgary Flames and say, wow, they didn't make the playoffs this year. They're going to look at all this stuff and say, wow, Brad Treliving was the guy who made that trade and things didn't work out. Look, Brad Treliving was held with a gun to his head by Matthew Tkachuk and was forced to make a move. He had just lost Johnny Gaudreau for absolutely nothing to free agency, and Matthew Tkachuk told him, you got a year and I'm leaving. So he was forced to make a move. He got two very good players back, Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar. He then had to go and continue to make drastic changes. He went and signed Nazem Kadri, kept Daryl Sutter. That team performed very well. In terms of luck metrics all season, Calgary was a very unlucky team, losing by one goal the majority of their games, losing in overtimes and in shootouts. This team was very close to making the playoffs, and had they had a little bit more luck throughout, they probably would have made it. Now, looking at Huberdeau, he scored 60 less points than he did when he was in Florida. That's not happening next season. They're going to get a new coach. They're going to get a different outlook as well. Look at Markstrom. He fell off a cliff from where he was the year before. You get bad goaltending, all of a sudden your team looks and feels a whole lot different. So I think that Calgary team could have been in a much different position. And truthfully, I think that next season, they will be in a much different position. And a lot of that is going to be because of the legwork that Brad Treliving did, getting ahead of the Matthew Tkachuk trade and bringing in some of those other guys who I look to as guys who will have bounce back seasons next year. So in terms of what he did there, he found ways around things. I don't think he's a bad GM. I think that he had an unfortunate last year in Calgary there, but Brad Treliving, to me, would be the next person down on the list that I would look to behind Tulsky and Matthew Darche. Leafs fans, thank you guys so much for tuning in here today. Let me know your thoughts below about the Kyle Dubas firing, parting of ways. Let me know what you think the Leafs should do going forward, what this means for the core four, what this means for the other guys a part of this Leafs team. Let me know who you think should be the next GM, and as well, let me know your thoughts on how this whole thing shook out and whether or not you are happy about the decision. But Leafs fans, Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It'll be very interesting to see what happens moving forward with this team as we find out more information, as we get a new GM, as they get a new coach, if that's something that's coming up, and we approach the July 1st deadline for all these guys, no move clauses kicking in. We will have all the breakdowns here on this Leafs Digest channel. All of that will be coming up, so make sure to subscribe, hit like on this video. But Leafs fans, I'm not panicked. I think that there are a lot of positives coming out of this. Fresh eyes could be the best possible thing for this Leafs team moving forward, moving into this summer. Thanks for tuning in. Keep believing.